Thank you very much for coming along on this truly ghastly day, for making it out of your nice warm homes. So we're going to compress quite a lot of information into just the next hour, but we'll all be around for another half an hour at least after that to answer any further questions, to guide you through some of the stuff you're going to see on the actual active websites, the interactive website that the LNRS Local Nature Recovery Strategy is sort of based upon. But hopefully you'll find the information useful. This is all about the relationship between nature recovery, so the biological quality of the island, which is exceptional, in the context of its biosphere status, so this incredible international status that we have. How does this data-rich platform that's been created, the LNRS, how does it help you? How does it help businesses? How does it help the island's economy? How does it help move us at a time of maximum need? Let's face it, how does it help move the island forward in such a way that it is moving us in a more prosperous direction at the same time as supporting and investing in that biological quality? And that's really what we're going to talk about. So some big picture stuff, some small picture stuff in terms of some direct tools you can use immediately, straight away, this day, this afternoon, to make a difference in the way that you think about intervening for nature recovery. And then we'll be able to have some questions before we close. So thank you again. I hope you find this useful. I'm going to hand over to Deneen to make a start on introducing the LNRS. Over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ian. So just by way of introduction, Ian and myself are part of the Common Space, which is a non-profit based in Sandown. For the last 2 to 3 years, we've been working with the Isle of Wight Council to produce the Isle of Wight Local Nature Recovery Strategy, or the dreaded acronym, the LNRS. So we're going to run you through what exactly that means, particularly for you guys in the room, but for the Isle of Wight as a whole. Why island businesses need to take action for nature recovery, what those actions might look like and how they can be meaningful, and then opening up for a bit of a Q&A and networking session. So the Local Nature Recovery Strategy, or strategies, are an England-wide piece of policy that came out from the Environment Act that requires every county in England to produce one of these strategies that identifies the priorities for nature recovery and the measures, so the actions on the ground that need to be taken in specific places to achieve those priorities. The Isle of Wight LNRS was published in May last year and achieved the status of National Exemplar. And within that, we fed in huge amounts of community engagement, specialist data, geographic data sets, and all sorts of information to produce a collection of the 4 documents, which you'll be able to have a snoop in at the end, that outline why the Isle of Wight is so important and what it needs for its recovery. Why we need to do this and why this is such a huge priority for this country and globally is to address, first and foremost, the biodiversity crisis. The UK has been named one of the most nature-depleted countries in the world, and previous ways of doing things to address that horrid reality just have not been working. So using things like a spatially strategic tool and getting everybody aligning to it across all sectors of our way of life is one of the key steps needed to start addressing this quickly and effectively. On top of this, as if that wasn't bad enough, we've also got a climate change crisis staring us right in the face, which couldn't be ever more present being on an island. Sea level rise, coastal erosion, more extreme storms, today is a brilliant example, drought, water scarcity, the whole lot exacerbating that biodiversity crisis even further. One of the key ways to respond to the climate change crisis are through nature-based solutions. So using the natural mechanisms and defences that we already have, but because of various ways of doing things, development, we're losing them. So returning back to those natural defences is a key way to address that. In addition to this, as a result of a loss of nature, this has meant people are losing access to nature, which is having huge impacts on people's well-being and being able to connect to the natural environment, which is so important to us as part of the natural ecosystem. So again, identifying where these places need to be prioritised to not only bring the benefits for wildlife, climate change defence, but also giving back to people what there should already be, that access to nature to improve well-being. responding to national and international targets in this country and all over the world, recognising these key threats and the key levers that need to be pulled to start responding to them. And only yesterday, the government published the Global Biodiversity Loss, Ecosystem Collapse and National Security Assessment, which has highlighted that loss of nature in this country and beyond is now a national security risk. This is for our food, climate change, migration, pandemics, all of it having a knock-on effect, and significantly, our economy, which is built on the resources that nature gives us, is now increasingly a threat. So all of these things sewn together are the sort of key priority for recovering nature. Specifically on our little island, while we need to buck up our ideas and really start working harder to recover nature, we are not alone in this crisis. We have seen 14 island extinctions since the year 2000, and this is only increasing with all those threats that I mentioned before. We've got 20 more plants and species in a critical decline state, but importantly, we've got 141,000 islanders who have the ability to help and take action to support the wildlife. This is the Isle of Wight local habitat map. So this is part of the local nature recovery strategy, which has outlined and mapped out where the key priorities for recovering nature that brings all of those benefits so together. So improving biodiversity, creating climate change resilience, supporting greater access to nature, and responding to a national security threat. In these locations, in blue, are our protected sites, so sites already recognised to be doing that job. And then in the green are these additional opportunities around those sites where individuals, organisations, or at a landscape scale, landowners can take action and support the decline of nature in these areas. So, how does this translate to businesses? I'll hand over to Ian.
Thanks, Deneen. So I'm just going to flick back to that map, actually, Deneen, if that's okay. Because it is a fantastic representation of the output of the LNRS. So that's 40% of the island, a little more. About 20% of that is the protected areas. So that's triple SIs, SACs, SPAs, things you may be familiar with. Sites of importance for nature conservation, 300 of those on the island. So we've already got this great cluster of sites that have a certain amount of protection around them. There'll be one near you, where you live, where you work. There'll already be one of these things. And what the LNRS will help you to do is to find that kind of adjacency. So if there's a site that has a particular ecological value, a particular ecological story, there's information embedded in it that you can use in the way that you take your own actions for wildlife. But as Deneen said, the LNRS has extended that through a huge period of consultation, almost 2 years, with organisations, individuals, mining for data at the same time, into this extended estate. So for the next 3 to 5 years, the priorities for high-level nature recovery are within those green areas. But the closer you get into the map, and we'll run this for you after the session if you want to stay and have a look, you'll see that it's an enormous estate. So in places it's thin but widely distributed, roadside verges, public greens, small public areas and urban sites, as much as large rural landscapes, as you can see. So the opportunity to pick one of these high priority areas of something that you can engage with is pretty much island-wide. And the LNRS also has within it a set of overarching objectives, which is really kind of the kind of stuff we're going to talk about in a moment, which fit everywhere. So there's a set of tools you can use pretty much everywhere to guarantee an uplift for wildlife, and then within some of these very specific areas, the LNRS will say, okay, in this spot, it's this kind of work for this kind of habitat for these priority species. So it works on 2 levels. There's a general toolkit, and there's a very precise level of information that you can really mine into to get down to what works for your locality. Okay, so the vision in the LNRS, actually I will read it out. We want to create a living, working island environment where the life chances of our communities of wildlife and people alike are enriched by the variety, abundance and quality of the ecosystems we will share. It's a single functioning unit. We can't pretend that we're not part of it, because we absolutely are. The Isle of Wight Biosphere is a unique ecological space where we have the opportunity to work alongside nature to forge a richly connected assemblage of healthy habitats in every parish and every farm, in every town and village to recover and sustain our island lives. So it's a grand vision, but it's a correct one. Unless we think particularly in a bounded ecosystem, such as the Isle of Wight, where there's very little bleed at the edges. Most of us are species here, trapped here to some extent, let's say. Wildlife in general, most of our wildlife, exactly the same. Of course we have migratory species, but most of the wildlife is here. So it's to some extent a mend and make do ecosystem. This is what we've got, how we're going to make this work for all of us. And I think that's a business conversation as well. But it's a community vision, and that is exactly the same for the 62,000 jobs on the island, for the 4,500 businesses on the island, for the 5,500 business premises on the island. These are all families of interest. These are all networks of engaged peer-to-peer discussions that can pick up this biological information and apply it and deploy it. So this is not restrictive, it's not selective, it's an open invitation for everyone to participate in this journey. Okay, so now the biosphere has come up 2 or 3 times, and the simple reason is, geographically, it's everything. So the UNESCO World Biosphere Reserve, and there's information at the back, on the panels at the back, to give you a little bit more on that, is huge. It's 900, a little bit more in fact, but 900 square kilometres. So you can see the whole of the island, that's just part of it. It's all of its inshore waters, and it's pretty much the whole of the Solent. So the UNESCO World Biosphere is it's not a Blue Peter badge, you don't get it for having been quite good at something or other. It is a future-facing designation. It's very specific in what it's saying. It's about finding a better way of using the cultural distinctiveness, what it's like to live a life on the Isle of Wight, and the biological quality, the stuff that the LNRS has to talk about, how to bring those things together to make a more sustainable way of living, a more prosperous way of living, a place that has greater prospects for all ages, perhaps particularly our young people. So how are you going to use the resources you've got better to make a better place? And that has to be an economic conversation as much as it is a social one, as much as it is a scientific one. So the biosphere is a domain of change, and it is a nature investment zone. So biosphere is increasingly around the world. There are 700 around the world. There's only 3 in England. They're all in the south. They're quite near to us. Brighton and Lewis is our nearest one. North Devon is our next nearest. If you want to see a mature biosphere and how it sees it, the purpose of its domain, do have a look at North Devon. So they've created an investment foundation based on the biosphere principles. So that's the kind of stuff that we need to do. So they are special ecological economic zones. That's what biospheres are. Their intention is to find new sources of investment that are seeking out environment, social, good governance, ESG, that are seeking out the kinds of things that the Task Force for Nature-related Financial Disclosure, these kind of high-level systems that are looking at sustainable, impactful investment around the world. It's generating an appetite to find places that can say, well, we're doing that, and that have waved a flag high enough to be visible. So this is pretty serious stuff. We've got one of a small club of these high-level intergovernmental accolades. We've got a biosphere. It is an economic unit because it is talking a particular economic language at a time that global investment is seeking to land in the sort of places it can rely on to do that stuff. So we need to take this very, very seriously. Now within it, the data that actually takes you to the next step is the LNRS. So the LNRS provides us really fine level ecological, biological detail that's accessible to everyone, so that everyone can be a part of that story and demonstrate positive action. But the key thing I really want to drive home is that this is an economic project. It is not just about the protected species in it, it absolutely is. It is about finding a better way forward for the whole of that territory, the Isle of Wight and the Solent as the 2 big units in it. That's a devolution story, that's a regional story, it's a political story, but it is very much a business and economic story. So there's a resource we have. We're beginning to understand how we might use it better, but the more we can work together to make full use of it, the further we're going to go. And you can already see some of these partnerships emerging. So Nature North at the bottom, Nature Southwest at the top. These are really big bioregional partnerships for nature-related investment, are beginning to open up, are beginning to form. Nature Southeast is one that we're already kind of talking to, based in Surrey at the moment in terms of its administration. So this is underway and it's moving very fast. So the stuff we're talking about, again, coming back to it, is a business and economy conversation. And if we can make the Isle of Wight part of that at scale, it will make the work that we're trying to do as individual businesses, as individual projects, easier. because the sources of investment coming to the island will be greater. They'll be seeking you out because you're already doing that stuff. How do they know? Because you're using the LNRS. So you can begin to see how it clicks together, how it links together. So there's a very big job to be done to wave the biosphere flag in a coherent and well-organised way as an investment opportunity, right the way down to individual actions of individual people and individual businesses. And that chain is critical, and that's what we can construct together. But it's already happening, so it's a competitive space. Investors will be looking for the right place to invest. The Isle of Wight can absolutely lead that field, and that's something we all want to see happen. And there are already, of course, significant funds available to try and push that agenda forward. So applying to UKRI, which is the investment set of, there are 7 research councils and 2 others, including Innovate UK, constantly churning out opportunities to bid for funding. And so the more the island has a coherent story to tell, and the more that local businesses are engaged in that story, using the LNRS, the more likely we are to start to win this kind of funding. It's a bit patchy at the minute. The island is very definitely an underinvested place when it comes to these kind of funds. Funding in general, to be honest, external funding and external investment. The story we're talking about is part of, not all of, but part of a solution to that. So we'll be able to bid successfully, confidently for these kinds of funding by using the LNRS, by using the biosphere. So the opportunities are out there. But the same conversation applies to the sorts of things that businesses will be having conversations around as part of their everyday business. This is not a high-level, esoteric conversation, and then we break and we talk about just the nuts and bolts of getting through the day, getting through the month. It's the same conversation. So all of the kinds of things, and I've only put up 12 here, that might be part of the way you're thinking about the way you organise your business, the way that you organise your strategic thinking, can have and should have an element of biological thinking in there. Not just for ethical reasons, but definitely for ethical reasons, but for economic reasons, because we're talking about added value at a time when added value is being sought out there in the world. So, for example, winning and keeping customers, a positive conversation about what you are doing for wildlife will meet exactly the same conversation from your customers. So the appetite to do good stuff for wildlife, join a wildlife conservation organisation, put out the bird feeders, have a Swift box, and we'll talk about that later. Fantastic display, thanks to Caroline, Monolite Swift at the back. There's a point of contact, and that's not just a good thing for a business to be doing, it's also peer-to-peer, business to customer, spreading the word, building local conversations. Reduced operating costs, now that is partly because some of the stuff we're going to talk about may give you the confidence to rein back a bit on some of the maintenance on the site, for example, for a good purpose. It may be that in a longer term, things like urban heating, the kind of plants that you put around your business premises, can actually make it a more habitable place under conditions of climate change, where it is just going to get hotter and more difficult to be at work sometimes in that kind of area. Better positioning for contracts and procurement, because they will increasingly be asking you, well, what are you doing for wildlife? And they already do, but it may become more conditional. It may become a much more competitive area. If you've got the LNRS and you've kind of used some of the tools that are available in it, you're already positioning yourself in a good way. Future-proofing, again, just getting ready for that sort of onset of different kind of regulatory change, different kind of fiduciary change. You're arming yourself with the right kind of words and the right kind of knowledge to be positioning yourself to make the most of any opportunities that are coming our way and coming the island's way. Staff attraction, retention and well-being, just because, now we worked a lot for many years with asset managers in JLL and in LaSalle, on sites all over the country, and they have a very, very hard-headed approach to the estates they manage, which is every square inch has to be doing a job. There is no room for waste. But even at that level of very hard-edged economic thinking, they had begun to realise that one of the benefits of their estates that they were managing was to generate space where a community of staff, organisations within those premises could share a garden space, could actually combine their efforts around an ecology project, could feel a sense of ownership and agency in the place they go to work in. So we can think about making use of business premises in all sorts of ways that can generate value for wildlife and lead to these other additional benefits. And that's all about working assets to get the best value possible out for our businesses and for wildlife, because it's kind of the same conversation at that point. So organisations like LaSalle ended up talking very much about the secular drivers of investment. And you'll see that sort of terminology out there. And this is part of that conversation. Community trust and goodwill, because the opportunity is to share what you're doing with your community. That's your parish, your nearby school, your church, any community within the neighbourhood of your business, or perhaps within the scope of the work that you do, the people that you visit and that you sell to, or that you provide services to. Building a conversation around this shared agenda just gets more and more positive. And it opens up new opportunities for you to get involved in your community, for your community to listen to what you're doing. Partnerships and collaboration, exactly the same. You're beginning to find peer-to-peer, customer to business, that partnerships outside the transactional are beginning to emerge. There's more we could do here. There's greater value we can extract from this relationship. And the LNRS is part of the toolkit that we can use. Ethical leadership and pride, just showing that the Isle of Wight is on the case, is a leader in the way that it thinks about nature-first investment, nature-informed business practice. Absolutely. Support for accreditation and credentials. So winning awards within your sector, winning awards within the island's business community, finding ways to actually badge what you're doing in the best possible way. The data within NRS can help with that. Reporting and communication, again, it just provides you with data, information and results. Planning and regulatory conversations if you're extending your premises, if you're building new business premises. If you're having a planning conversation, then you're going to enter the territory of things called biodiversity net gain. You're going to enter a planning conversation. And that dialogue includes the local nature recovery strategy, and the data within it is important for part of that infrastructure project that you may be doing. And critically, at the bottom, avoiding greenwash. The LNRS is an absolutely rock-solid statutory document with an evidence base that has gone through 2 years of checking. So using it is a really good way to show, look, we're serious about this. This isn't just a matter of just picking some current convenience and calling it progress. That's much more important. So a whole bunch of stuff around business practice. And of course that's aided and supported here on the island through these amazing schemes, through the Green Impact scheme. So definitely join Green Impact, be a part of Green Impact. We've got Amelie at the back here, who can give you more information on that. Thank you, Amelie. And of course the Chamber's Own Business Awards, which has a sustainability category here. So there's lots of fantastic support within the island's business ecosystem for this kind of good practice. And the more we drive that forward and the more we accelerate that with the LNRS and the Biosphere, then the island stands out as a place that truly believes this, that lives and breathes this kind of relationship with its own ecosystem. So there's loads of good stuff to be a part of. Okay, so that's the big picture. So that's the investment journey that the island is on. And it's a serious conversation, and it is happening now, and there are lots of people engaged in it. And you can see that it's happening elsewhere. So we have to be on this, or we'll be left behind. Hopefully, as that works, it will make the sort of things you're trying to do just get easier, because there will be additional investment, there'll be additional support, there'll be more conversations, there'll be more information, there'll be more that you can kind of connect up what you're doing to the bigger picture. So we're beginning to move forward with that. But let's talk about practical stuff, which I hope will be immediately useful to you. So the first, with thanks to Hippocrates, is do no harm. First, do no harm. What have you already got? Have you got a pond? Have you got a bit of grass with an orchid on it? Have you got a tree? Start with that. Start with what you already have. So quite often with wildlife gardening, we tend to think, well, I've got to do something new, I've got to plant a wildflower meadow. We're obsessed with this kind of stuff, and sometimes it can be good and sometimes it isn't good. If you've got something that is already functioning as a habitat, start there. Try not to knacker it, is a good piece of advice. Try and invest more in it. So are there things you can do around it? Are there things that you can add to it? So build concentrated effort with the features you already have. So understanding what they are and how they work is really important. Again, the LNRS can help you because it can indicate the kind of protected areas near you. You may be right next to a woodland sink, site of importance for nature conservation. You've actually got a remnant bit of it on your business premises. There's immediately a conversation to be had about how that works. So start with what we've got, and that includes, of course, waste. So the thing driving biodiversity collapse and climate change is essentially a waste conversation. Waste carbon, waste plastic, waste fertiliser residues, waste particulates in the air and in the soil, and so on and so on. So managing our own practices, being good custodians of our sites, is incredibly important. So it's not just adding new value, it's stopping contaminating the stuff we've already got. So always start with what you've got, think about it, what can you do to make that even better? Okay. Wild lawns and urban meadows. If you've got a bit of grass, it will already have most of those flowers. Maybe not top left, but maybe top left. I'll mention that in a moment. It'll already have all that. So you don't need to fret too much about constantly sowing wildflower seed. So wildflower meadows have a kind of buzz about them, and that's really good. But you'll be sold very expensive wildflower seed, and you'll broadcast it about, and it will look exactly the same as it did this year, next year, and the year after, and the year after, and the year after, potentially. If you allow some of the stuff that wants to flower, in the grassland you have to flower, it will look like that. And this is magnificent. Flowering lawns with white clover, with self-heal, with bird's foot trefoil, with a bit of red clover as well. You've already got that. It's everywhere. The thing is, we don't allow it to flower. So the herbaceous stuff is there, the flowering systems, and therefore the seed set don't go all the way through. The lawn for the daisies, absolutely brilliant. Really super important early season nectar and pollen source. Fantastically productive the year round. So let's use the stuff that you've already got. And it doesn't have to be everywhere. You may really need a very clean business frontage, I don't know. But there will be something you can allow to go all the way through to flowering and then give it a cut late in the autumn. Or leave some of it alone entirely. So don't forget that you've already got wild lawns and urban meadows. If you've got any grassland at all, you've already got one. So back to where we started about valuing what you already have. That doesn't mean to say you can't improve it. You definitely can. And if you are going to use wildflower seed, use it in small, concentrated pockets. So the wider you try and spread that effect, the harder it gets, because you're then straying into agricultural management, horticultural management anyway, that scale. But if you create little bare patches and really dose it with wildflower seed, then you will be able to see it. It will be visible and have a good effect. And it'll have an uplift on the spaces around it too. So again, it's back to this idea of focusing your attention on small pockets of intense investment for wildlife, because it's visible, you'll feel good about it because you'll see the results, they won't be invisible, and they'll be immediate, and you can tell people about it. So focus your attention on these patches. Top left is Autumn Lady's Tresses. It's absolutely beautiful. It's an orchid, and it's the sort of thing that will suddenly appear in a lawn, on a tennis court that's been left go, on a playing field. These are highly persistent species that exist in a vegetative state for years, decades, and will suddenly flower given the chance. So there could be amazing secrets hidden in the bit you've got, in the roadside version next to you. Who knows? Until we give it a chance to flower, we don't know. So you've already got all this stuff. Let's make the most of it. You've almost certainly got bare ground. You've certainly got, I would have thought, a wall or a car park. These are also fantastic. So we kind of think of bits like this, this moss-covered, tree-rooted, rough patch as being somehow unsightly. Oh, I don't know, maybe it is. I love them personally, but worse than that, of no ecological value. Absolute nonsense. They are of extraordinary ecological value. So a cover of moss is absolutely packed with invertebrate larvae straight away. It's a terraforming system. Lots of small plants root in moss initially, begin to get a foothold, begin to spread. But if you peel, I don't know if you've ever done this, very satisfying, peel a carpet of moss up, underneath there'll be loads of larvae. Really important for moss, micromoths for example. So value those areas. They're really, really good. Retain some bare ground. If you've got moss coverage, if you've got moss and lichen coverage on a wall, it will be doing exactly the same job. So these are highly productive ecological environments for very tiny things that do not need a lot of space. But if we scrape it and bleach it and power wash it to death, it never has a chance to actually provide that ecological value. There's always space. Now, of course, if you've got a slate roof that's covered in moss and it's coming through into your kitchen, understood. But there is always space to allow this stuff to flourish. We do not have to cleanse our environment in this hyper-hygienic obsession. We can allow some spaces simply to be bare and a bit scraggly. From a wildlife point of view, that's perfect. And the more that you begin to combine this, bare ground, moss coverage, lichen on a wall, your little bit of grassland, your single tree, can you see beginning to knit these things together? So always value bare ground. Lots of stuff, lots of ground-dwelling invertebrates need it to egg lay in anyway, lots of beetles do, for example. So constantly trying to get rid of bare ground is not a great thing. So value it, and particularly moss and lichen. Oh, dandelions. So you get dandelions for free. They just come with the kit. A lot of other stuff too. I just wanted to mention dandelions because the Isle of Wight is the capital of dandelions certainly in England. Now, what does that mean? Dandelions are very strange and complicated flowers in that they are a huge, in fact 250 microspecies. Now, there's a complicated genetic explanation, but essentially the dandelion you've got on your lawn may very well be a different species to the dandelion on the church lawn or on the school lawn, because they split themselves into microspecies and they are highly site faithful. So they will respond to very small ecological changes, very small ecosystem changes. So we've got an enormous abundance because of the diversity of small habitat types on the Isle of Wight. That's how the Isle of Wight works. So people who are specialists in dandelions, they come to the Isle of Wight. So we have dandelion tourism. Isn't that a wonderful thing to be able to talk about? So, value this stuff that we already have and don't worry about it. Everything edible. If you are going to plant stuff, make sure that it's edible. Make sure that something is going to eat it. Now, you may say, well, why am I going to plant something and then it's just going to be sticks? Well, that's not really how that works. Edible plants put on enough foliage to cover being grazed. That's literally the point. So think about doing a bit of homework. Are you really interested in getting a whole set of urban butterflies? Then the adults will visit most of the flowers in your garden. The larvae will not. So, not so much true for moths. So some moths are not fussy at all, will eat almost any kind of wild grass as a larvae. But most butterflies are pretty fussy. So what are you interested in? What butterflies do you want? What kind of food does the larvae want? We need to spend a lot more time thinking about larvae. So there's a whole campaign about loving larvae, because if we don't think about those, then we get no adults. And they live a lot longer, they do all the hard work, they get all the protein as a larva. You don't get that as an adult, not really, not much anyway. And you live a lot longer. So, for example, something like a stag beetle, which feeds on deadwood, which has nutrition but not much. So it eats its way through its larval stage for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, depending on the quality of that wood, and then it becomes an adult. So needing persistent forage value for the larval stages of wildlife is incredibly important. And you can do tons of homework on this, and you can have a lot of fun in designing this banquet for the larval stages of the adults that you want to see. And as I say, some stuff isn't that fussy. Lots of moths will feed on wild grass of almost any kind. But that's what we need to do. So we need fruit, we need seeds, we need foliage, we need deadwood. We need to think about life cycle services. What are these things going to need for the whole of their lives? Can I provide a set of wildlife with everything it's going to need for its entire life cycle such that it never has to leave? So I get the benefit of an entire cycle and then it starts again the next year. And I've provided that system. It's totally possible, completely possible. So think about edibility for the year round. This doesn't have to be just wild plants, it can be garden plants as well. So think about a mix that provides you with the maximum amount of edibility for the longest amount of time. You may not have a lawn of any sort. You may have no green space at all. You can achieve exactly the same things, making sure I can't do it for time, with pots and planters. So if all you've got is a window box, you can still do this stuff. You can still create an ecosystem in a box. It's totally possible. And they can be different shapes, different sizes. Great if you can stack them or tier them, because that kind of 3D shape matters. There'll be slightly different aspects, slightly different temperature gradients. If you're very, very small, that makes a difference. So think about not everything flat all the time. Try and give it a bit of height, a bit of elevation, a bit of complexity, a bit of structure, and that will attract more and more wildlife into your domain. Think about what you're putting in there. So are you providing plenty of food, like we've just talked about? Are you providing stuff that's going to overwinter? Hollow stems, we'll mention that in a minute, really good for hibernating insects. Are you providing some bare ground? This is a wonderful example here. That's John Little, I think, that one. Where it's a sand planter, and that's very deliberately so that there's bare sand for mining bees to nest in, and then to feed on the plants that are provided, so they can do the two things next to one another. So you can be really creative, and that's a wonderful story. So if people are coming to your premises, or you're on your socials and you've got photographs of this slightly unusual looking bit of planting work that you've done in a new planter, it's a story straight away. It's a reason to build contact with your customers and your followers around this idea of building your own ecosystem for Isle of Wight. So plots and planters, temporary habitats. The beauty of that also, I should have said, just go back one, sorry, is you can move them. If it doesn't quite work in area 1, you reshuffle them. You put them in area 2. And even more beautiful in some places, you can create a pot ecosystem and then share it with someone else, and they can have it. And I've seen this done really well with orchids, with urban orchids, bee orchids in particular, where someone has a pot full of salvaged bee orchids that they've been able to rescue from a site where they were going to be lost, and they've kept them in their garden and allowed them to set seed, and then they've given them on to someone else, and they've had it for a bit and allowed it to set seed in their gardens. Really great ideas about building these conversations. Okay, so water, incredibly important. It does not have to be a permanent pond. You do not have to have a lake. You can have a puddle. That's absolutely fine. You may already have one. You've got a conveniently placed pothole. That's fine. It's absolutely fine. If it's temporary, that's not a problem because there'll be wildlife that will use it while it's there. So you're providing, again, this part of a life cycle for something. You can be more creative, of course, and you can have a pond with a kingfish, and you can have a pond in a planter. They are absolutely brilliant for this, of course, and easy to maintain as well. But providing water as part of the mix is very important. Or knowing that there's water near you. So again, coming back to the LNRS, are you near important wetland habitats? If you are, fantastic. What kind of stuff might you be able to add additional support for? How might you be able to provide a bit of extra food or a bit of overwintering habitat or a high ground refuge for the sort of stuff that has to move out of the way in the middle of winter when it's all flooded? So you can work with your adjacent landscapes the more you know about them. So providing water, big, small, multiple, the more the better. Lots of puddles are better than one. And lots of puddles are probably better than one big pond in some ways because they're all so different. And they'll all be providing slightly different temperature regimes, slightly different topography and so on. So I just wanted to take a slight sidestep and talk about holes. So these are incredibly popular. This is the most beautiful all because it's made by Nigel there. And these are real works of art, and they are absolutely magnificent, and they're part of a kind of landscaping project. You can imagine how lovely these are. And they all do a good job. And you may very well have seen these kind of ones in garden centres, bee hotels, bug hotels. But in the end, the beneficiary, that little red mason bee, doesn't actually care. It just needs a hole. And you can provide a hole with a drill. So this is great. I'm not saying don't do this because it's beautiful and it attracts attention, that's fantastic. But perforate the bits you can perforate. So not just nesting bees, but also overwintering species. If you've got a 4x2 or a 4x4, one of the big posts that are holding up your fence, everything's always over-engineered, or you've got an available bit of timber, you've got the side of a bench, maybe the side of a planter, definitely, then drill some holes in it. Anything between 3 millimetres and 10 millimetres, 5 mil is a good all-purpose diameter. As deep as you can go, but don't go all the way through because it stops working. It's got to be dead-ended. Fantastic. Do them in clusters so that you can see them and go back and find them, because the satisfaction is seeing that they work. You want to know that you've made a difference, and you will have done. So you can add value just by drilling holes in an existing wooden object, or indeed any kind of object, any kind of fabricated object, because it will provide that additional complexity. And so much of what we're talking about is just adding this kind of dynamic complexity to otherwise very simple, very smooth objects. So holes are really good. The more the better. They provide nesting habitat, overwintering habitat. They build their own little ecosystems. The bees that nest in those holes bring with them what are called commensals, species that live on the frass and the litter that's chucked out of the nest hole. They bring parasites, slightly more brutal, and things that live on them and their larvae. So they bring with them a whole club of other things. And this is the key thing about gardening for wildlife, about working for biodiversity. If you pick the right things, you get a whole bunch of stuff you wouldn't expect. And so you can very quickly build up benefit. So holes are good. Buy a drill, borrow a drill, share a drill. Overwintering. So a big part of the way wildlife works is that it needs refuge over winter. So things that hibernate, so reptiles and amphibians, hedgehogs, things that we're familiar with, bats, of course, that hibernate in different ways, some more torpid than others. But most invertebrates, for example, will spend the winter in some kind of hibernation form. There's very little that's active. Spiders are active all through the winter. You'll have noticed that. That's what keeps all our wrens alive. But a lot of other stuff is underground as a larvae, or it's hibernating as an adult. It's where you get small tortoiseshell butterflies in your shed over winter. So providing places where they can safely hibernate and overwinter, which are good refuge year-round anyway, is a great idea. That can be a compost heap. So that's really good. So building a compost heap, if you do composting, having a kind of sacrificial heap that is just for wildlife is a really great idea. And that can be much rougher. You can have lots of big sticks in there, you can have lots of rubble in there if you want to. It can be a multi-purpose kind of pile. And all of the nooks and crannies within that will be ideal, providing these cool, dry spaces for overwintering. And this is really super important because if species have to travel a long way to find their hibernation sites, think about amphibians, from their breeding ponds to the places that they spend the winter. If that's a long, hostile, dangerous journey, they're probably not going to make it. So by bringing the things closer together, breeding ponds next to hibernation sites, perfect. You're reducing risk, you're reducing the amount of energy that's required to move between these sites, and you're getting the satisfaction of seeing these things over and over again, year after year. Oh, hollow stems. Yeah, I mentioned about picking plants. Things like fennel, absolutely brilliant. Any of those kind of big umbellifers, because they have these hollow stems over winter. And if you crack one open now, inside, it'll have earwigs, it'll have ladybirds. It's a bit of a shock if you break it out and there's 100 earwigs just fling themselves out of it. But it just proves the point that these are providing really essential ecosystem life cycle services. All you've got to do is pick the thing that have a hollow stem, and it does that job for you. Lumpy ground. We're obsessed with flat, smooth greenery. So almost every new development, and certainly most industrial landscapes, indeed most landscapes, residential or otherwise, the green bits are flat. Well, there is nowhere on the planet that is just flat. And yet we have manufactured this least interesting topography and called it good. Why is it good? Because it's easy maintained. That's why. So we've kind of built places in order to be able to run the mower over them. We've kind of missed out the in-between, the utility, the enjoyment, and the wildlife value is kind of subsidiary. What we really want is lumpy ground. So you want to get the maximum surface area in the smallest perimeter. So how do you do that? You make mounds, you make hollows, you make dips, you make banks. Now on a big site, if you're doing some kind of engineering work, that's a perfect excuse not to cart that stuff off. So all of us, well certainly in our team, we've worked on projects where they may have spent £50,000, £100,000 carting off material on a cut and fill as contaminated trade waste by that point, which could have been kept on site and built a wonderful, complex, lumpy landscape by retaining it on site. So you can use inert waste, you can use brick rubble, you can use soil, but make lumpy, interesting landscapes because they will have dry bits, they'll have wet bits, they'll have north-facing bits, they'll have south-facing bits. You can imagine how complex an environment that is for small wildlife. Now, will it be trickier to maintain? Yes, it will, but we're a sophisticated species. We can do this, people. We can mow lumpy ground if we really need to without having a nervous breakdown about it all. So lumpy ground. And of course it'll have hollows and voids inside it. Again, hibernation space, overwintering space. So just lumpification as part of your mindset in the way that you think about managing the space that you have access to or having conversations with others is absolutely brilliant. And if you make an embankment and then plant a hedge on it, for example, it just gets better and better. Nest and roost boxes, there's some wonderful examples, and Caroline from Isle of Wight Biosphere has produced bought some wonderful materials back right-hand corner of the room. Do please have a look. Caroline, can I just point to you? And thank you. So Caroline knows everything there is to know about swifts. So this is a swift box and a swift. Providing these kind of nest and roost boxes is in some ways the simplest thing you can do because they're so available. You can buy them off the shelf and you can install them. They come with instructions to some extent. You can't just put a swift box anywhere and expect it to work. So there is advice available through, again, from Caroline from Isle of Wight Swifts, from Hampshire Swifts. There's so much advice on, well, what's going to work with the elevation I have? How high is the building? How wide is the gap between me and the next building? What are the fly lines in and out like? So there's some thinking to be done. But choosing available boxes, house martin boxes, and house martin boxes to have a look at as well. They're less fussy. Is a great way to add value. It may take 3, 4, 5 years or longer for them to find you, but you've added that capacity for them to visit you and to use, and something we'll certainly use. So do please go out and have a look at the kinds of nest and roost boxes that you might be able to use. And there's a huge variety that are now available. Bats as well. So bat roost boxes, there's a huge range that are available. Big ones and small ones, outdoor ones, ones that are integral so you can build into new build. So there's all sorts of possibilities around providing these habitats for bats and nesting birds. Okay. So last one of this crash course in practical actions for wildlife. I'm sorry we're moving through it fairly speedily. Artificial light at night, which is called ALAN, that's the acronym, is a problem. Now, of course, this is always going to be a pragmatic and a nuanced conversation because human safety comes first, really. So do we feel safe? Are we safe in the environments that we are creating? That's got to be our first consideration. But where we can reduce illumination, artificial light at night, in a way that doesn't make it unsafe, then we're doing favours for wildlife straight away. So highly illuminated nocturnal environments, which that's an industrial landscape, have very profound effects on the behaviour of wildlife. Now, for sure, opportunistic feeding by bats around street lamps, we've all seen that. Of course, that happens. But it has much larger and slower systemic effects on, for example, the larvae we were talking about earlier. So lots of research been done on the behaviour of night feeding larvae. They change their behaviour, they grow more quickly, they are much less resilient to disease as a consequence, they shift out of the way. So there are patterns of behaviour that artificial light at night generates that are not favourable to wildlife. So it's a general rule, if you can reduce your spotlighting so it's less like a Premier League football pitch at night, that's really good, that's fantastic, to the extent that you can, of course, within the limits of your safety regime. But reducing that, and then alongside that, planting species that are night garden species. There's a whole bunch of them. Have a look on the websites, look up night gardening. There are loads of plants you can incorporate into a slightly darker nocturnal environment that will attract nocturnal life, beetles, and moths, of course, and with it the things that feed on them, such as these gleaming bats. So quite a lot of bat species, rather than doing this amazing dramatic dogfight, hunting down the moth through echolocation, will actually lick insects off leaves. And so artificial light can really cause very considerable problems for those species in particular. So reducing light, reducing night illumination, adding night flowering species to your mix, you're beginning to build a nocturnal world to go with your daytime world. You may not see it, but it's functioning. And you can think wider than that, of course, in terms of hedgehogs and badgers. But think about the nightlife, think about nocturnal life and how you can add support. Okay, so thank you very much for your patience. I hope some of that was useful. I'm going to hand over to Deneen for actions in the Q&A.
Thank you. Yeah, just to finish with this really, that although it is amazing to do all of these actions on your site, if for whatever reason that isn't possible, or you do want to expand your actions out wider to your local area, supporting those brilliant organisations, and Ian's already referenced White Swifts, that are already out on the ground doing amazing work on your business's doorstep is a great way to keep supporting, as an island, nature recovery. So the LNRS and the online local habitat map, so you can visit the website and zoom right into where your business exists, is a great way to find out actually what action, if I were to support something, would have the biggest impact for the island as a whole. So finding out where you can take action, finding out why you should take action. So within your area that you identify, the priorities and measures will come up and explain to you what the key issues are in that area. So this here is an image of the Medina. Pollution is a really significant issue for the Medina. So what could I do? I'm near the Medina estuary. I understand pollution is a really significant problem here, causing water quality issues. Who can I support that are already doing the work in that location to further their work, give them additional resources, and keep the impacts and benefits for nature recovery happening in that area? And we are soon to be uploading a full register of all the organisations that are operating on the Isle of Wight doing this work, so you can seamlessly pretty much navigate where you are, what you need to do, and who's already doing that job essentially for you. So finishing now on some next steps Ian, did you want to wrap up with that one?
Thanks, Dilly. So back to green impact. So many of the things, in fact all of the things that you've heard about in terms of what the LNRS can offer in terms of sort of spatial mapping, in terms of techniques you can adopt straight away within your business, within your work. We're going to work with Amelie and Green Impact in the next iteration, so that would be next year, Amelie, to try and make sure that using the LNRS segues perfectly into being a part of Green Impact. And I think Green Impact is going to be really important. It's a fantastic scheme, and as part of this bigger investment conversation, the more businesses, the more organisations that are part of Green Impact, the better. It just gets louder and more visible. The conversations are happening more readily and more dynamic. Help shape business resources with us, so do have a look at the website, so there'll be a chance to have a look at that before you go. We'll set the website up for you. If there's additional help that you need, if you're finding the NRS, it is a lot of information on there. If it's difficult for you to navigate, if there are tools that are missing, if you can talk to us about that and we will find ways to try and to work with you on that. The objective is to make the LNRS as practical and useful as it possibly can be. Within its terms, it's a statutory legal document that has to look and sound like this. But within it, the more accessible it becomes, the more valuable it becomes. So we'd really like to get your thinking on that. Take action for wildlife on your site, wherever that is. If you work from home, then it's your home. If you have a business premises, it's the premises. If you're talking to other people who have business premises, it's them too. So this idea of building a conversation about actions for wildlife as part of your business thinking within this wider investment story we're trying to build for the Isle of Wight is really part of the LNRS. It's just engaging and spreading the word. Use the resources on the Isle of Nature website. So do have a look, sign on and have a look. If you find your way through to the toolkit, you'll find most of the stuff we've talked about in terms of practical measures all listed out there, so you can find them again and see what you think. If there's stuff that doesn't make sense, it's weak in places, it's missing in places, there's additional stuff that you would like, let us know, because it's in constant evolution. So it's an in progress project, and refining it as we go is critical, so that it's as valuable as it can be. And really, in doing all of these things, and I'm sure already, you're part of this Island Nature investment journey. And it is an investment journey. You're investing your time, you're investing your energy, you're investing your creativity in working for wildlife. But at the same time, we are talking about an investment journey for the whole of the island to the extent of its biosphere territory that is critically important for the future of the island. So you're a part of that. And the LNRS is the toolkit that will give you what you need to continue on that journey. So, thank you very much. So we've got a bit of time for some questions. We'll still be here, so plenty of time for mingling, but if there were any questions that you wanted to ask in the company of others, then do feel free to stick a hand up. Yes, hello.
Would you be able to share the content of that? Is that available anywhere else?
So the slides themselves, the slideshow we'll be putting up on the...
Yep, that's what we've been recording. So there'll be a recording. We have an Island Nature YouTube channel already, as well as a Common Space and an art one. So you'll be able to watch this again, but also we have we'll do like a slide set as well.
Right.
We also have a nature recovery toolkit, as Ian mentioned, which is really comprehensive. It's sort of across businesses or gardens or whatever industry you are. So that's also just on live on the Island Nature website. And as Ian mentioned, there is a site-specific sort of toolkit that we can offer to help, just to give you, so that you can sort of actually plan what it is that you're doing within your own area. So that's something that you just give us a shout and we can help with. But yeah, there's going to be a movie.
Two concerns, Ian. One is promotion. I note that you're saying that there are 141,000 people on the island who can make a difference. I'm not sure that a 3-week-old baby could add much.
True.
Or somebody in their 90s who is having difficulty in walking. So in promotion, perhaps one shouldn't exaggerate too much, because the adult population that's going to be affected is only about 80,000.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we've only got about 30-odd people here today. I feel that you're preaching to the converted.
Yeah.
Change over to education. You have been teaching us today about nature. The majority of the population in the country live in an urban lifestyle. Your last screen was, you can find out about this, you can find out that. It requires positive action by the individual. Now, not every individual, especially those living in an urban environment, are concerned about what's in the countryside, more concerned about what the result of traitors is going to be on television. I feel that there isn't any aspect in the NRS of education. We need to, Island, Dinosaur Isle starts off the story of the island talking about the original geology and the animals that live there. What we also need is public education on how the countryside works, which is what you've been explaining today. Having said that, the message should carry on as to how important it is that we look after the countryside in the future. So what is the aspect of NRS that's going to feature education?
So there's already been presentations to schools, to the schools network, to the cultural education partnership. So that kind of engagement, working with Katie at the back on the Eco Schools network, that's all underway. So all of that is already happening. And some schools, of course, it depends. It's a very demanding environment, particularly primary school. So if there's a GCSE for natural history still on the cards, it's bubbling away in the background, there's an opportunity straight away. So it's happening, David. It's a slow, difficult process because the school environment, particularly in the Island, is very, very difficult. But every school has space to take some action, and some, 19 is a great example, are really doing amazing stuff. So I totally agree with you, but I think those conversations are underway. The second point you made, I think, is about the countryside. Now, what I suggest is that NRS is absolutely not about the countryside, it's about the whole of the island. And some of the things I was talking about were quite deliberately urban. So do you have a concrete wall covered in moss and lichen? Well, that's very likely to be, it's as likely to be an urban feature. And I think it's an important point you make, that it's crucial that the opportunities and the agency to take effect for wildlife is everywhere. It is absolutely everywhere. And the same techniques, slightly differently deployed, apply everywhere. And I think that's part of the teaching element of this, you're quite right, is that there is no discrimination between those two. Yes, of course, a farmed landscape will have a set of tools, the maintenance of urban green space will have another, but they're not so wildly different, it's not part of the same conversation. And one of the jobs of the NRS is to pull all of that together, to stop making those unnecessary discriminations. We can act for wildlife using a solid toolkit everywhere, anywhere. So I agree with you, I think agency is super important, spreading the word to those who are empowered to take decisions, but not making people feel guilty because they can't. That is actually a very important point that you make, that it's a collective effort across the whole of the island, and that urban spaces are just as important for that, because they clearly are as rural spaces. So, thank you. Yeah.
Can I just add to that as well? So I'm from UKSA, so we clearly have the river frontage. But actually, I was thinking about the moss and the hard standings. We have got so much space that isn't green, that isn't garden, that actually we could be using. But we also have kids coming from all different backgrounds, and actually we can support the message with them. They're coming for something completely different, but if we can be drip feeding it as part of them coming and enjoying themselves and not necessarily thinking about it, then it's small parts, but I think it all adds up eventually. So I thought it was really interesting. Different way of thinking.
Thank you. I totally agree. UKSA is such a great example, because just as you say, managing the space so that everything clearly has ecological value, and I'm likely to encounter wildlife, and that's been thought about, and I can see the all the way through to the infrastructure that's part of your business.
There's loads of scouts on the island. You've got your workforce there, haven't you?
Yeah.
It's not sweatshop kind of thing, but it's there's lots of them. We've got 1,500 on the island, plus the guides and everything else. We run a scout campsite over at Corfe in Shalfleet, which is already under Triple SI. But is there? We have so many volunteers come in, never enough, never. We have very few people that have done all courses in nature, forest management and everything else. We go on people's goodwill and come down. Is there a forum that you've got on your website that we can communicate with other people? So for example, we've got the space to actually change things as well, and it's a constant change, but we don't always have everyone that we need to actually come on it. There might be people that haven't got the space to change, but want to be part of it, would like to come up to the campsite and get involved.
Yeah.
Likewise, there's probably companies out there that have got vast amounts of cash that can't actually do anything, but would tick the box by investing in the campsite. Being a bit selfish, but you know, and then we have thousands come to the campsite from up and down the UK, and if we can cover that educational thing like the UK say, then you know we get people from urban that come over and never seen a cow. You know, it's and they can take a little bit back with them. So it's all, if there's money to help us educate, if there's money from businesses that would help us buy tools, machinery, or just that side of it, and a forum that we can ask people to help.
Yeah.
Then and we'll do it. It's like I'm asking for everything else. If you can sort us out some cash and
global
and knowledge, then happy days. We'll right for you.
No, Corfe is amazing. All my 4 kids went through the system, so I know Corfe very well, and it is the most brilliant learning environment because you've got wetland, you've got woodland, you've got the creek side, you look out onto the harbour. So it's a fantastic opportunity. It features very strongly in the LNRS, so you'll find Corfe with a whole bunch of colour schemes around it on the LNRS. So it's already a site that's picked out within the LNRS as being significant and important. So there's definitely something we can build with you on that, and to find ways of actually using the amazing amount of activity with young people and with others to bring the LNRS into use so that you can deploy it in a way that makes that a more educational experience and potentially attracts additional funding. Absolutely. The point you make about the forum, I think, is a really good one, and we have talked about it.
Something that you raised this, didn't you, on your Net for Meaningful Planet said it exactly that.
I think it's a great idea. The NHS has a brilliant one called the Academy of Marvellous Things, I think it's called, and it's a great, it's really worth having a look at, and that is where practitioners say, do you know, I tried this and it was absolutely brilliant, I tried this, it was a complete catastrophe, do not do this. And that kind of constant dialogue around experimental thinking, which is exactly what this is.
Absolutely. I mean, we've got forums and Facebook groups with pretty much all the campsites around the country. And if we start and we get it right, put it out to the next one, and then before you know it, you're around the country. So
it's something I think we can definitely talk about, and the fact that you're also a biosphere scout camp.
Yeah, that's the
it's something to talk about. So absolutely, fantastic opportunity. So it's great. Thank you.
Right, just going back to the start, we kind of said that the UK was one of the most extreme examples of biodiversity loss. I'm just kind of curious why that is, because as a country, we've long had environmental protections with green belt, use of pesticides, air quality, water quality. And compared to other countries our size, our built environment is actually quite a small percentage of our total land, at 7%. So what is it that's causing the biodiversity? What are we fighting against with things like this? What is causing that? If compared to our peers, we should have better macro conditions.
You go.
It's about habitat quality, not habitat extent. So national parks is a live debate at the moment. So aesthetic, I think there is a Victorian-esque love of the aesthetic in our landscapes that does not translate to ecological quality. And so you'll see that constantly in conversations on the island too, about greenfield, for example. Not looking to open that can of worms, I'm just saying that greenfield for us does not mean it's ecologically useful at all. And so quite a lot of it is that very large landscape extent that is undeveloped is still of a very poor quality ecologically, through historical land management issues around the pressures on farmers and agriculture in general to try and make some money out of whatever is the current scheme, about tree loss and about then tree replacement. So these kind of patterns of essentially abuse of the landscape to some extent, driven very often by an aesthetic thinking rather than a hard-edged biological science thinking, is I think one of the reasons that that's the case. So it's not that, you're absolutely right. The level of development is relatively small. It's almost exactly the same on the island, the urban core 7-8%, something like that. So again, the conversations in our head about conquering it over the island, we have a kind of mismatch in terms of our perspectives on these things. But the quality of the undeveloped bits, in places may be very, very good, but in other places very poor. So the triple SIs on the Isle of Wight, 5,000 hectares of triple SI. So the highest designation, legal protection, at least a fifth of that is in very poor quality. There's one triple SI on the island that has no part of it at all in favourable condition. So even when we put on these protections, it does not mean that they're being well managed. So it's a messy answer, but I think there's something about habitat quality, about our lack of investment in serious ecological management, and in place of that putting a broad landscape management aesthetic in place that is not the same thing.
Just addressing this gentleman in front of me who spoke first. I think there's a massive amount of overthinking that goes on sometimes, and we can do some very small things. So as a parent, and as a grandparent of 4, all of my grandchildren have planted seeds, have grown things. We have built a bug hotel. We're very fortunate in that we have a third of an acre of fairly wildish garden, because I don't have the time and energy to keep it under control all the time, which is probably a good thing. And we put piles of logs, and we go for walks at Quor Abbey. So going back to what this gentleman said, education starts at home. It doesn't have to be in schools or at college or wherever. It can start with planting some beans. My youngest grandson is 10. He has a box that we built in his back garden. He grows beans. Well, I grow them and I give them to him, essentially. You start them off, Nan, and I'll get on with it. Right, okay. And he grows tomatoes, and, he takes great pleasure in seeing all of those things happen in his own small habitat. My 87-year-old mum lives in London in an urban setting, has a balcony which she fills up with plants, with flowers, so she's got bees, she's got butterflies, she's got all of those things. Small steps, don't have to overthink it, don't have to have a massive premises. You can have a pot, even if you are not the most mobile person in the world. You can have a pot outside your front door with some lovely plants in that your kind grandchild might plant for you, or something like that. So I think there's a massive amount of overthinking sometimes, but actually sometimes it's just small stuff. Don't let Claire Hector ever give you toad flax.
Pale toe flax is like agriculturally rare, isn't it?
No, totally agree. And I think the more that those individual small-scale efforts are scaled by replication and through conversations, so someone tells someone else, I did this and it was really good, and they do it, and you begin to build these clusters of activity. And you can think about these in terms of ecologically meaningful distances. So if you do something really brilliant, it's beginning to track wildlife, and someone does something similar 150 metres away, many of the things that are visiting you will also visit them. So there is a way of building up stepping stones in the urban environment, and indeed in the rural environment. You don't have to do everything everywhere. You just need to do concentrated efforts that really work, and then think about where the next one's going to go. And that may not be you, it may be with someone that you've talked to. Absolutely. Any other questions?
A comment rather than a question. I think that list of organisations that you're going to produce is essential.
Right.
At the County Ag Show, I was surprised walking around about how many organisations I found that I didn't know existed. The list of different organisations looking at different aspects of nature is amazing on the island, and I think once that is out, people will know where they want to go to follow their interests.
Yeah, absolutely, totally agree. I think that networking is super important. And just to finish by bringing it back to the biosphere, the biosphere territory as a space that is beginning to attract attention and investment as a field of change, makes every one of those organisations even more valuable, and the communication between them as a whole even more valuable. So absolutely, yeah, totally agree.
Just have a quick build to that. So talking of organisations people might not know exist, I'm from Innovate UK Business Connect, which is the front door to innovation, basically. So you spoke about the grant funding. We operate in a space I've spoken to Nige, Sue Barker about Seapool, so we had some really interesting conversations about really exciting stuff going on the island, and we're there basically to fund it. If it's innovative, you're a business, let's have a conversation. If it's something that not specifically in our remit, something we can pass you on, help identify funding pots there to drive that real change. I'm from the agri-food team. My background is in plants and crop research, but I actually work with a couple in Allen Bay, Warren Farm, helping doing a bit of regenerative farming there. So I'm really fortunate to be based on the island, actually doing the job I do now, because you meet really inspirational people doing some really fantastic things. So we're all paying for it with government, with our taxes. It's government funding. Let's have a conversation and see if we can get some funding to make it happen. So.
Brilliant. Thank you for what a great way to finish.
Innovate UK.
Innovate UK. Thank you.
Just on that note, actually, because with David, just to say, actually, the people in this room are not the converted necessarily. Everybody in here, we've contacted people right away across the island, across industry. We've had the support of the Chamber as well in getting the message out, and across the press. So in this room, we have people from the prison service, we have people from Farringford, from Wild Heart, from God's Hill. We've got small businesses, big businesses, cemeteries. We've got industry and Gurit and stuff like that. So in this room, we have a whole load of people who are actually actively engaged in their businesses right the way across the sort of the gamut, and there are more to come. So what we'll do after this is we'll put everything together. Obviously the film, the video will be up on YouTube, but we'll put everybody in touch with one another, and we can share everybody's details if everybody's happy with that, and make sure that so if you want to speak to Chris's emails there. The toolkit does have actually every bit you go on to if you want to know about Swift, box installation and stuff like that. There's little signposts on there as well, but you can always give us a shout. That's the other thing.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for coming. I hope that's been useful. Please stay in touch. If you want to carry on the conversation, we're here for another half an hour, and we're happy to show you some of this stuff on the website. Do have a look at Caroline's fantastic Swift display at the back and have a browse of the biosphere information. So thank you again. Thanks very much.